My
Take that
spicy
for data.
right.
Yeah, take that for data, exactly.
Meghan McPeak, tell me about a random athlete that you loved when you were growing up.
So this is gonna be like the cheesiest thing, but also sentimental. It's my big brother. He's the reason I got into basketball. Like plain and simple. Whoever he's the reason. He's the reason I love the Bulls. He's the reason I love Michael Jordan, because he had posters of MJ. He watched the NBA, so he got me into watching basketball. And my dad got me into watching other sports like football, because, as you know, Morgan, when you live so close to Buffalo, the Bills are the one team you get consistently.
Sadly.
So yeah, my favorite athlete growing up before any professional athlete would easily be my big brother Matt, because if not for him, like, I didn't have an older sister, so like most of the time, the younger sibling, you want to be like your older sibling. So mine happened to be my big brother. So for him getting me into sports, that's the reason I am where I am today. So yeah, cheesy, but with no question on that one. It's got to be my brother Matt.
Extra cheese, we like that. Provolone, cheddar, put it all on there, melt it, make it tasty. One of the athletes that I loved growing up was Glenn the Squirrel McCausland. And some of you guys are saying, who's Glenn the Squirrel McCausland? But if you were lucky enough to grow up in the Toronto area in the 1990s, you remember Saturday afternoon OUAA football on channel 11, and most times you would kind of watch it just to contrast how slow these guys were when it was like Western versus Windsor or whoever, contrast how slow they were compared to the games on ABC. But when Glenn the Squirrel McCausland, 5'6", 150-pound receiver, punt returner Glenn the Squirrel McCausland was on channel 11, you tuned in. You said Notre Dame could wait. You go back and look at his highlights. U of T, you guys need to do a better job of putting his highlights together, putting it out there on YouTube, because this guy, 92, 93, 94, was one of the most spectacular players in the history of Canadian university sport, author of a DK Metcalf-esque chase down tackle in the 1993 Vanier Cup. Go find it on YouTube. Shout out to Glenn McCausland. Dave Zirin, who's your cult favorite young person athlete?
Well, I'm not saying this just to kiss and smooch the behind of the Canadian audience, but the New York Mets iteration of Rusty Staub was, for me growing up, the cult athlete, because Rusty Staub, when he was with my Mets, was not the Montreal Expos player that the Canadian fan base surely remembers. He was profoundly overweight. He liked the occasional cig. He liked, going to the bar after the game. They never put him in the field, and they would just put him up there to pinch hit, and he was just amazing. Any pitcher, anytime, bam, single, bam, pinch runner, bam, sits down, gets another heater. That was my hero.
Profoundly overweight and like the occasional cig. So he would have fit right in with the members of the Czech national basketball team that beat Canada in Olympic qualifying this summer.
No neck beard, though, because he was a light red-haired fellow.
Hey guys, welcome back. Another week, Bring It In with Morgan Campbell. I'm your host, Morgan Campbell. If you like what you're hearing from week to week, hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment. And also interact with us on social media. Use the Bring It In hashtag. If you don't like what you hear, we don't care. Hit dislike, leave a nasty comment. We really don't care. All we're trying to do is feed the algorithm. I don't do this alone. I do this with the best panel in the business. Joining me from Washington, D.C., the play-by-play voice of the Washington Mystics, the play-by-play voice of the Capital City Go-Go, and Matt McPeak's famous younger sister, Meghan McPeak.
How's it going, everyone? The funny thing, that's funny. It's funny that you titled me Matt McPeak's famous younger sister. I bug him about that all the time.
Oh man, did I touch a nerve?
No,
like, is this gonna be a thing at Canadian
I always
Thanksgiving?
bug him that I now, of the two of us, that I'm considered cooler to his friends than he is.
Oh no! See, he's at home watching this with
he embraces it.
Oh, he's at home watching this with stress balls. Like, I can't believe she did it again.
No, he's
it.
great. He embraces it. It's funny.
Good. Also joining us from Washington, D.C., the author of 11 books. The 11th book just hit the market last week, The Kaepernick Effect. Dave Zirin, what's up?
Oh, just glad to be here. A remarkable night last night. The Ravens.
It's okay, perfect. Okay, so as usual, we got a lot lined up. We're talking a little bit of college football, some track and field, which it's the end of the season. We get to wrap up a specific part of the season. Always happy to do that. We're talking field goal kicking and the scarcity of women's soccer jerseys. But we're going to start this one off sort of like the way we did last week. As baseball playoffs approach, I'm going to ask for their spiciest baseball takes. But it's NFL season, week 2. Dave already has the Ravens novelty football. So I'm going to ask Dave for his spiciest NFL week 2 take. Go ahead.
This might sound spicy, and I don't have definitive proof of this, but I do believe that the Ravens fan base on Twitter has bequeathed to us the coolest intro in NFL history. As soon as Michael K. Williams left his mortal coil, rest in peace, the Ravens fan base said that when we do the opener, you got to play the Omar Little from The Wire whistling of Farmer in the Dell before the team comes out as tribute. And it was the sort of thing where we were just joking about it on Twitter, also sort of mourning, like, oh, this would be so amazing. And sure enough, they did it. And I'm still kind of stunned by that fact. Like we literally spoke this into being. And on a night where Michael K. Williams was absolutely positively robbed at the Emmy Awards from getting a posthumous Emmy for Lovecraft Country, just a ridiculous decision, but on a ridiculous award show, quite frankly. You had proper credit being given to him among a faithful who has all the love in the world for him and everything he's meant to Charm City.
And I love that the city embraced him. Like, he's not from Baltimore, but he played Baltimore on television. Right? But they still embraced him. Exactly.
Yes.
As we were saying last week, because it's like he made Omar a real person.
Yes.
And so here we go. We're going to celebrate Omar like he was from here, because you know what? He might as well have been. Meghan McPeak, what is your spiciest take coming out of week 2 in the NFL?
I mean, it's hard to follow that one when you're, giving Michael K. Williams more flowers that he clearly deserves. And
yes.
I'm with Dave. The Emmys, I mean, they're trying to use the excuse that they voted a week before his death. That's it. Whether that's true or not, at the end of the day, he deserved the award no matter what. So whether you voted already or not, like you got it wrong. But that's neither here nor there, because the Emmys never get it right anyways. But mine actually, Morgan, kind of ties in with yours when we were talking about it before we started recording, is which works out because our spicy takes now go together. Kyler Murray is going to be the NFL MVP of the 2021 season.
Okay.
Dual threat. He has, I mean, more assets on the field than one QB could imagine. I imagine that Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers are wishing that he had as many assets and weapons on the field to throw to or dish to. And he's arguably playing in the hardest division in the NFC West in NFL. So if he can lead them to a division title, I think 1, he should be in the conversation, and 2, he should win the NFL MVP.
Like, I haven't even spiced your take. And here's the thing: is Meghan and I, McPeak, Campbell, clearly we both grew up in Scotland, right? I actually have a kilt on underneath them here. But here's my spicy take also has to do with Kyler Murray. I'm gonna one up you, Meghan. Not only is Kyler Murray an MVP contender, my spicy take, based on what I saw yesterday, 29 completions in 36 attempts, 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I don't care about those. But my spicy take is that Kyler Murray is going to be, by the end of this season, better than Patrick Mahomes. I said it. And you don't have to be a lot better, because at that level, you're not a lot better than anyone. If he's 0.5% better than Patrick Mahomes, Dave, go ahead.
Just real quick, another spicy take. Doug Farrar on Twitter, terrific football writer, pointed out that if he goes at his current pace, Tom Brady will have thrown more touchdown passes in his 40s than he did in his 20s. That's bonkers.
It's insane.
I'm not a Brady guy. I mean, like the opposite, but like that's the sort of thing where you just sort of have to, get your fingers off the keyboard and just say, wow.
And that's not a spicy take. That's data.
That's just
Um,
fact.
That's factual.
yeah. No, but my
Take that
spicy
for data.
right.
Yeah, take that for data. Exactly.
Now, my spicy Kyler Murray take. We have to look at it in the context of my previous Kyler Murray take, spicy take from 2 years ago. My previous Kyler Murray spicy take was that he should have quit football altogether because he was a first round draft pick of the Oakland Athletics. They gave him $4.67 million. And he said, guys, just let me play one more season of college football. I just got to get out of my system before I become a full-time baseball player. Okay, this one time. And he went and he played. Did he win the Heisman that year? He might have.
No.
But right. But either way, he said, here, take your $4.67 million back. I'm a football player. So I've gone from a guy who thought Kyler Murray should quit football to thinking that he is going to be the best quarterback under 6 feet tall in the history of the game. Like Doug Flutie walked so that Kyler Murray could walk on his tiptoes, throw that ball up there to fast little muscle-bound Rondale Moore and DeAndre Hopkins. This is spicy stuff. We will, you know what? We'll stay tuned. We'll see if my spicy take pans out. In the meantime, you know what? Let's stick with the gridiron. This past weekend, Christy Elliott, she plays for Simon Fraser University. I'm going to tell you in a minute why I laughed, but she is a kicker for Simon Fraser University out in Vancouver, and they don't play Canadian schools. I want to say they're an NAIA school, and so they play American teams in Washington State, Oregon, places like that. So they played against Linfield University up in Oregon. They lost the game. I think it was 56-20, but Christy Elliott kicked a field goal. So she becomes the first player in Canadian university sports history, even though they're playing American schools, to play in a football game and to score a point in a football game. Meghan McPeak, how historic is this moment?
I think it's twofold because on one hand, you have this amazing moment, and we saw it last year as well too with Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you know, you have sports patting itself on the back, as sports always does. But then on the other hand, you still have sports kicking itself in the butt and putting its foot in its mouth at the same time. So it's like one of those situations where I always say like two things can be right at the same time. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
it's a fantastic moment and it's historic, but at the same time, sports is still not where we would like it to be when it comes to equality, with, you know, women in sports, and whether that's in women's sports or
Mm-hmm.
women being able to play men's sports in like this situation, or on the media side, when, you know, the landscape of sports media does not look like the landscape of sports itself as well too, with seeing more women covering men's sports, and it being simply because they're good at the job and not because they're a woman. But then you also on the same hand have situations like what we saw over the course of the last year with the Mets and their organization and how they treat women, the Washington football team and how they've treated women. Then, of course, the biggest news this past week of you seeing just four of them, because that was all that was able to speak at the time, and many others of the hundreds of female gymnasts who were victims and now survivors of the Larry Nassar abuse scandal, and were completely forgotten about and discredited by many people. And to see what they were able to do this week and speak and stand and show their strength, when at the end of the day, they were the only people who had their backs, with the exception of their immediate family members. They did not have the support of law enforcement, as we heard Simone Biles and Ali Razman and many others tell us the conversations that they had. I was blown away when Ali said that she was sitting with an FBI agent and they told her that her situation was not considered abuse. Like, how do you pat yourself on the back for historic things, but then you still have situations like that continuing to happen in 2021? So while this Simon Fraser news is fantastic, and don't get me wrong, as a former female athlete, I think it's amazing to see more and more women in sports doing things that have not been done before. But at the same time, sports needs to also realize that they still have many problems within the sports landscape.
Yeah, one of the reasons that the Vanderbilt kicker story became such big news was that it was a happier circumstance, happier ending, sort of. Remember, she became the kicker because COVID had ripped through their roster and they didn't have enough people and they had to go audition soccer players. But the first Division I kicker, Katie Nida, she didn't get that label this time around because she was not a Power 5 kicker, because when she was at the University of Colorado, the Power 5 didn't exist, right? But she was the first high major D1 women's player, and she had a horrible time at the University of Colorado. And similar to what you just laid out with the gymnast, like, she, after she left there, said, hey, I was sexually assaulted by my teammates, coaches, administrators. They didn't take it seriously. And then here came Vanderbilt, and this is kind of like a happier circumstance. So we can celebrate her without having to look at so we can celebrate the breaking of the milestone without having to look at the systemic barriers that Katie Nida butted heads with when she was at Colorado. Dave Zirin, and this also, again, there's the administrative side, there's the rulemaking and rule breaking side, but there's also like the sports business, sports marketing side. Dave Zirin, our good friend Sonali Karnik. So I got Kai on the brain because of Kyler. Yeah, Sonali Karnik has a story about how nearly impossible it is to get Canadian women's national soccer team merchandise in Canada. It's not like the team is popular here or anything. It's not like it's been the most successful Canadian-based footy team ever. Like, what gives? Dave, tell me.
Yeah, I mean, when I read that story, my first thought was, and frankly, I had this thought as well with the Simon Fraser story, is just, my goodness, we are still trapped in the same narrative that women in sports have been trapped in since the start of organized sports in the 19th century, because it's still this battle to fight for basic access. Because when sports start, women were just simply not allowed to be part of what was happening. And so this is why when people say sports aren't political, I'm just like, how can sports not be political? Because it was actually founded on political grounds. It is baked into the cake because it was founded on the political grounds of exclusion of all kinds of marginalized folks from actually taking part in the games. And so for women, it's always been this fight for access on the playing field, on the media side, all aspects. It's like a party that, pushing up against the glass. And while we should celebrate every breaking of that glass, I mean, there has to come a time where we're just sweeping up the shards with a broom and we can all just exist in this space that is sports. If it's baked into the cake, then we need a new cake. Because it's like when we celebrate these milestones in 2021, it just serves as this stark reminder of the ways in which it floats back and forth from progress to regress, from forward thinking to backlash. And when you have these stories that make you feel good, and then you think to yourself, wow, Major League Baseball is really thinking about partnering with Barstool Sports, like an empire that was founded on the very foundation of sexist garbage. It's like, it really makes you think about how this is just might have to be an ongoing battle for as long as we play these games. And that can be a source for me of some frustration, because you want at some point to put this in the dustbin of history and be able to move forward.
Yeah, as far as Canadian soccer is concerned, like, this is such a missed opportunity for Soccer Canada, I think is the name of the sport organization now, because your women's team has just won a gold medal at the Olympics. Like, their profile is never going to be higher than it was last month. And you're never going to have an opportunity to extend that profile like the one that has just fallen in your lap. If you can take advantage of that via merchandising, via licensing deals, via, like I've seen, and hey, shout out to the women's eights rowing team. One of the members, Lisa Roman, is married to a kid that I guess they're not kids anymore, but that I used to coach in football. So she is a Mississaugan in-law. But like, I've seen more of the women's eights rowing team since the Olympics than I have seen of the women's soccer team. So if Rowing Canada can figure out to get their gold medalists out there and keep them in the public eye, keep the sports profile high, keep talent coming in because kids see this and they say, hey, I can do that, then I don't know what gives with Soccer Canada, because I know if I had to wear, if I had the choice of wearing like a women's soccer jersey with a Canadian player's name on it, Charmaine Hooper, sign me up. Megan McPeak, who would you get?
Ooh, I probably would have to go with the GOAT in Sinclair. Like, I mean, she's arguably probably the GOAT of soccer period, not just women's soccer in Canada. Like, I think her name should be in that conversation of soccer. GOAT soccer player, period, in Canada, men's or women's. Like, how do you not put her in that conversation? But I think if I can pick up off to what Dave was saying, in the fact that, like, you think of, Morgan, what you were saying with regards to rowing Canada being able to still have their women's eights in the forefront. Like, the easy thing for Canada soccer is the fact that the NWSL is still going on, and a lot of your players are playing in the NWSL. So why are you not trying the cross? Like, so the interesting thing is NWSL and WNBA. A lot of the people who cover both leagues like to call it the crossover when, soccer players go to support the W and vice versa. So how would you not do the crossover of, okay, you've got players going back to Portland to play. Let's do like crossover promotion. Like, how are you not thinking of this thing? And this topic actually reminds me of the fact that you could go into a store in Chicago and you cannot find a Candace Parker jersey in store. You can get it online, but you can't find it in store. That is Chicago's child who came home in free agency. Like, how can you not walk into a Nike store and buy a Candace Parker jersey? Like, you can't find one. It doesn't make sense. So, like, it's not just on the Canadian women's soccer side, it's Canadian women's sports that you can't find merchandise in stores anywhere. And now you're coming off of a gold medal and your best showing at an Olympic Games, and you're not taking advantage of utilizing this from a marketing standpoint to now think of the next generations that you need to try and continue the success that you've had.
And if I could just say real quick, Adriana Leon,
yes,
tremendous player on this team, and another example too of the difference between how sports executives and marketers think of women athletes and how the people think of women athletes. I was just looking it up. Adriana Leon's got like 150,000 Instagram followers. I mean, she's plays for West Ham. I mean, this is somebody who can hold the potential to grow the sport. And I think it's just interesting in this social media age how people are gravitating towards her, because the powers that be are not recognizing they have a team of players who can absolutely grow the sport.
Last topic for this block of the show. Let's move to one of my favorite sports, track and field. So Megan McPeak, if I had told you before the season that the most consistent 100-meter runner in the world this year would be a 400-meter guy who moved down just to dabble in the 100 and just didn't leave. And then if I had also told you that the top 3 times in the world would be an American, a Kenyan, and an Italian. Scale of 1 to 10, how wrong would you say I would have been if I had made those predictions to you
52
5 months ago? 52.
It's too low.
78 at least.
977.
977.
See what I did there?
Yes, I see what you did.
I did there?
I see what you did. Okay, well, just to get the audience caught up, track and field season ended for all intents and purposes. The 2021 track and field season ended in Kenya, of all places, on this past Saturday, the Kip Keino Classic, Kip Keino Invitational, I think it was called. Biggest performance that came from their men's 100-meter, Trayvon Bromell, who was the world leader this year, one of the favorites going in the Olympics, didn't even make the final. He jumps up, runs 9.76, which is the fastest time in the world this year, eclipsing his own time, because before this race, he had run 9.77 back in the springtime. So he tapped into whatever was missing, because he got on a plane to go to the Olympics and he was missing a quarter of a second. He got that quarter of a second back. Made his last race his best race. Shout out to Trayvon Bromell. But in second place, Ferdinand Omanyala from Kenya ran 9.77. This is a Kenya national record, a personal best, obviously, by a tenth of a second, an African record. And also, I will argue in a minute, very historically significant, but Dave Zirin, what did Ferdinand Omanyala just do to the stereotype that East Africans cannot sprint?
Omanyala smashed it. And I think this is important because we get caught up in these ideas of people getting slotted, whether it's
Yes.
culturally, and there's an undercurrent of genetically in how we
more
talk.
than an undercurrent. That's the current.
I just think like the language has changed where
Yes.
you know, decades ago people would just straight up say it, and now it's, well, you know, the culture of the area, how people live, how people interact, the history of success breeds repetition, and it's just it's all BS. It's all a fog for the fact that people are slotting folks into what they can or cannot do, and that can sometimes truly culturally change people's expectations of what they can or cannot do, and that's a shame, because I mean we should be working towards a society that's more open, where people can actually gravitate towards what their interests and skill set says they can do. So I love it when you see things like this, because it makes all the folks who still live in that world of geneticism have to eat their words. And
Yeah, well,
you're right. I think, just to say more, I think you're actually really right, as I'm parsing this through my mind, that while the language has shifted from an almost eugenics analysis to this cultural analysis, you're seeing the eugenics thing make an ugly comeback, as you see of all sorts of really, really wretched political forces. And so I think when things like this happen, they do have this effect beyond the world of track and field, and make people rethink some of their preconceptions.
Yeah, obviously. Now, like, to be a great athlete, to be a great runner, and be a great sprinter, you do have to be born at the deep end of the gene pool. Like, there's no getting around that. You have to be born with a talent to develop. But I think what people lose sight of when you look at like these great Kenyan distance runners is that so many of them mostly come from the same part of Kenya. So people talk about Kenya like every Kenyan is the same, and like every part of Kenya is producing all these distance runners and all those people. And that's what makes that feat even more incredible, is that all these great distance runners basically would be like coming just from one city in the US. But if you are willing to look at like a wider view of sports, and all this should be, you can see that like every Kenyan athlete is not Eliud Kipchoge, because you would have seen Julius Yego win a medal at the World Championships, I think in 2015, in the javelin. Guy taught himself how to throw watching YouTube, and he's not a little wispy marathon guy. Like, there are all kinds of different types of people in Kenya, but what we see is the people that run the marathon, and then we in North America decide that every single person in the country is like that. And then when somebody comes along, or if you watch rugby sevens, and the Kenyan team just won a medal in Vancouver at HSBC rugby sevens, and you look at those guys playing rugby sevens, these are big, fast, powerful athletes in the conventional sense. In the North American sense, they're not Eliud Kipchoge, they're not Concessus Kipruto. They're not these little skinny wispy guys. So the fact that a Ferdinand Omanyala exists and can exist shouldn't surprise people, but it does, because people get locked into this very narrow view of how people should look and perform from a whole country with, I want to say, 80 million plus people, and they think everybody's going to look like Helen Obiri, and it's just not true. Meghan McPeak, what did you see that race?
I did not, unfortunately.
Oh man, because I was going to ask you.
I watched it back on YouTube though.
There we go. That's what I mean. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were going to watch,
if you had live.
No. It's another time zone. We'd had to be up at like 4 a.m. If you had to take bets at the 50-meter mark in that race, would you have even thought that Omanyala would be in the same zip code postal code, because we're in Canada. Postal code is Trayvon Bromell.
No, especially when you think they clocked them at what, 976 and then 977. I would not have had him that close behind, especially too when you think about the fact that when you watch the race in real time and not wait for like the replay and then the cool virtual like different colored picture that they showed to show who actually finished
the
first.
Heat map.
If you just if you just watch it in real time, like you would think that they both crossed at the exact same moment. So then to see the replay and then the heat mapping, and you see that he was just a smidge behind. It's crazy to think, like, I would not have pegged him to be in that orbit or in that world. Like, it would have been, in my mind, Trayvon Bromell, and then, you know, like a couple hundredths of a second, and then somebody else, but not like right on his heels.
This is my favorite part of the week. We only got 2 topics this week because we're going to keep it, like I said, we're keeping it spicy. First up, we're coming to you, Meghan. The manager, because we don't say head coach in soccer or footy, the manager at Bayern Munich, Julian Nagelsmann, had some thoughts on earpieces for players. He says, and I quote, "American football is much more technologically advanced than football. The quarterback has an earpiece to hear his coach. We absolutely need that." Meghan McPeak, are you in or out on footy players with an earpiece so they can talk to their manager?
I mean, isn't that like going against the purists of footy? Like, I feel like that would, the way that the Super League thing had footy fans up in arms, I feel as though this would have footy fans up in arms. Like, I feel like soccer is the one sport, or one of a couple sports, that their purists of the game do not want anything touched. So I'm going to be out because I don't want the footy purists coming for my neck.
Yeah, well, and it's bad enough that the analytics crowd is trying to quantify soccer in ways that a lot of traditional soccer fans don't want the sport quantified. But here, Dave, let's hear from you first. You in or out on the footy pitch earpiece?
I mean, how could I be more out? I mean, what do I got to do? Get on one of those Jeff Bezos space shuttles and leave the planet? I'm so out on this. One of the things, why is soccer the most popular sport on earth? I mean, at its most basic level, it's because what Lionel Messi does is the same thing that I saw the kids in the streets of Rio do. And that sort of that incredible organic connection between a sport that anybody can play and what people do at the highest levels is intrinsic to its attraction. So the idea of now trying to mechanize it and turn it into something, frankly, that I think would belong more on the next sequel of the Terminator than the actual purity of the sport, to me, says that this idea should actually die a quick death.
I am all the way in, only because I know this is a self-correcting problem, and 10 minutes into the first game that somebody tries this, I just want to see that moment where some coach is trying to tell Leo Messi how to play football, like in real time. Like, good players don't need this level of micromanagement. Kyler Murray can talk to Cliff Kingsbury between plays, but when Kyler Murray is running around looking for Rondale Moore, he's not listening to Cliff Kingsbury. So I am just waiting for that moment, just because I want to see it. Here's why I'm in on it. When the coach is jabbering in Leo Messi's ear, and he just takes the earpiece out and punts it into the stands, and then earpiece era over. It's
like
done. That's why I'm in on it. Topic 2, Dave Zirin, we're going to start with you. I'm sure you saw Oklahoma versus Nebraska. They're reviving the storied rivalry, even though Nebraska is not good. Like, the fact that they finished within 3 touchdowns of Oklahoma, like, hey, that's a victory. Take it. I'm not into moral victories. Nebraska, that's a moral victory because he didn't get shut out. But it was a crazy interception. DJ Graham from Oklahoma, over near the sideline, near the end zone, jumped up, airborne, backhanded, one-hand interception, tucked that ball underneath him and kept his arm between the ball and the ground so that some hall monitor referee couldn't say, "Oh, I think I saw it move. No interception for you." Incredible play. Dave Zirin, you in or out on that play as the greatest catch of all time?
I'm definitely in on the phrase hall monitor referee all the time, because I feel the same way about the way this is rolling right now. But in terms of referees' interaction in the game, but I didn't think I would be, but I'm in on this. I mean,
really,
I gave it a great deal of thought. I thought of a one-handed pick I once saw Lawrence Taylor do. I thought of that catch by Santonio Holmes at the end of the Super Bowl, yes, the fingertip double tiptoe in. I mean, so there have been obviously some remarkable catches over the years. And if you want to make it in terms of context being everything, then something like the Santonio Holmes catch has to be at the top of the list. But what I saw that young man, DJ Graham, what I saw him do in that game is like nothing I've ever seen before. And, there's an old expression, go to a baseball game and you're going to see something you've never seen before. Nobody really says that about football. So to go to see a football game and see something that you've never seen before, it is pretty special.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, just this morning, Monday morning, we record. I was watching NFL Network, and Nate Burleson, Calgary-born Nate Burleson, and Chris Carter were talking about, like, just the ball skills of defensive backs and how how profoundly they've evolved in the last, 10 or so years. And you're seeing the types of interceptions that you wouldn't have seen before. Meghan McPeak, you in or out on this play as the greatest catch ever?
I'm out. Dave said it best. Santonio Holmes for the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like that's the level of standard that we now have is for the Super Bowl. And then I would probably have this one like top 5 maybe, but for me, Santonio Holmes would be number 1, and then OBJ. But also too, you did it against Nebraska. Do it against Alabama, and then maybe we can talk. Like the level of competition, much different. So
that's true.
The OBJ answer is really, really smart too, because that led to a trend I know among my son and his friends of trying to catch the ball with 3 fingers, as if that was the ultimate status symbol, a 3-fingered catch. And they all say to each other, "Here, throw me an OBJ, throw me an OBJ," and everybody knows what that means. That's pretty special.
It also led to a trend of people with like curly dark hair dyeing it blonde. OBJ. There was like so many OBJ hairs for about 3 or 4 years. It was an incredible run, but I'm out on that play as the greatest catch of all time for a couple reasons. One, there's like the hardcore football nerd reason that's like, hey man, it was 4th down. You just put your team at a disadvantage. You should have batted it down and taken the ball at the line of scrimmage, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not that guy. I appreciate athleticism wherever it comes. Like, I don't care if like you're Oklahoma, they're Nebraska. You should be able to drive the ball 98 yards instead of 80. You guys will be fine. But the greatest catch of all time, is Eddie Brown from Edmonton, who has changed their name, against Toronto in the 1996 Grey Cup in Meghan's hometown of Hamilton, Ontario, at Ivor Wynne Stadium in the snow, off the shoe tops into the fingertips for the touchdown. That's the greatest catch that has ever been made. He did that at a full sprint, kicked that ball up to himself. And I would say I would die on that hill, but I have no intention of dying. I'm just going to sprint up to the top of the hill. And if you try to argue otherwise, I'm just going to roll you back down to the bottom of the hill like a snowball in an avalanche. Eddie Brown, 96 Grey Cup, the greatest catch of all time. You know what's the greatest panel of all time? This one right here. Bring it in. Perfect. Meghan McPeak, the people are going to miss you between now and next week. Tell them where they can find you. As
always, on Twitter, although with the Mystics season ending this weekend, I will be sparse on the Twitterverse, taking some breaks. But if you catch me at the right time, at Meghan McPeak, spelled with an H, because it's the right way to do it.
More time to tweet about 90 Day Fiance, no?
Did you watch?
No, I was watching the game. Sorry. No, I got to get the 2-screen action back.
You got to watch it, because there was a term that came up that I just can't stop laughing at. So I'm going to let you watch, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay, perfect. Here's the thing. There's no such thing as a shameless plug, because there's no shame in plugging. Dave Zirin, plug your book.
It's called The Kaepernick Effect, Taking a Knee, Changing the World. It's about the young people who were inspired by what Colin Kaepernick did to take the struggle to their hometowns, and then what the heck happened to them after they did. If you read the book and you want to talk about it, I'm at Twitter at Edge of Sports, and because it's 2014, I'm trying to get into Instagram. So you can at Edge of Sports on IG.
Perfect. And as always, I'm your host, Morgan Campbell, at Morgan P. Campbell on Twitter, at Morgan P. Campbell on Instagram. I don't have TikTok. I don't have Triller. Too old for TikTok, to everything else for Triller. But you can find me Instagram, Twitter, at Morgan P. Campbell, or you can also leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to CBC Sports YouTube channel if you like what you're hearing. If you dislike it, leave a dislike. Leave a nasty comment. We don't care. We're just trying to make the algorithm happy. Until then, I hope you all are happy with this episode, and we will see y'all next week on Bring It In with Morgan Campbell. I'm your host, Morgan Campbell.